If someone ever cites Snopes as a source as to whether to judge the veracity of a claim, please direct them to this article and laugh hysterically. Did Nathan Phillips falsely claim he was a Vietnam veteran? Nuances frequently get lost amidst social media uproar and hastily filed news reports by Dan Evon. The photo of the Phillips, who walked up to a group of children and started singing in their faces and drumming in their faces. He started pounding this stick on a drum inches away from a child's face. And the news lost their minds. Nathan Phillips falsely claimed to be a U.S. military veteran who served in the Vietnam War. Unproven. Well, just strap yourselves in. Nathan Phillips, American activist Nathan Phillips, said he served in the U.S. Marines and told news outlets he was a Vietnam Times, Vietnam-era veteran. What's false, contrary to the multiple news reports initially stated, Phillips was not deployed to Vietnam at any time during his military service. As a video showing an altercation between Phillips and a group of Covington Catholic School kids went viral, a number of news outlets published articles identifying him as a Vietnam veteran or veteran of the Vietnam War. Some news sites noted that was improbable due to his age. A Native American activist, Phillips, faces questions about reports that he's a veteran of the Vietnam War. According to multiple news sources, he's 64 years old, which means he would have been 18 in 1973, the last year any combat troops were stationed. He also claims to be a Marine veteran, although the last Marine combat units left Vietnam in 1971. Odd that Nathan Phillips would say he was a Vietnam-era veteran. If I was a Gulf War era veteran, but I served in Germany or something, I wouldn't say I was a Gulf War era veteran. I would just say, yeah, I was a veteran in 91 or something. It's obviously disingenuous. Other sites, such as Conservative Daily News, more harshly classified the discrepancy over Phillips' military service as stolen valor and claimed that the Native American elder had outright lied about his military service. That's coming. While it's true that a number of accounts from national news outlets incorrectly labeled Phillips as a Vietnam veteran, the use of that label in those reports did not, as far as we can tell, originate from Phillips himself, except in a few paragraphs we're going to find out this isn't true. And this is right here is a lie. The Native American activist told reporters he was a Vietnam Times or Vietnam-era veteran, which in itself is a very... it's a phrase that shades the truth, meaning he was an active member of the armed services during the time of U.S. military involvement in Vietnam, not that he'd been deployed to Vietnam during that period. Then why mention it? If you're not a combat soldier, why would you mention it? News outlets such as the Washington Post and the others all publish updates to this story. Okay, the Washington Post, they all corrected that he served in the U.S. Marines, was never deployed to Vietnam. Okay. But the corrections indicate the misinformation had not come from Phillips himself. CNN's transcript of their interview with Phillips twice included Phillips referring to himself as a Vietnam veteran, but the first instance was obviously a transcription error, as Phillips could clearly be heard saying that he was a Vietnam Times veteran, not a Vietnam veteran. He says, when I was there and I was standing there and I seen this group of people in front of me and I seen the angry faces and all that, I realized I had put myself in a really dangerous situation. Well, if you watch the video, a bunch of kids are standing waiting for a bus, just a bunch of harmless, innocent children waiting for a bus. And Nathan Phillips and his group were loudly chanting and drumming, and Nathan walked into this group. And the kids made way for him, except for this one kid who just stood there smiling. And the adult, the 64-year-old, starts drumming in his face. So this is a lie. I realized I had put myself in a really dangerous situation. You think those high school children are going to lay a finger on you? You know they're not, and I know they're not. Here's a group of people who are angry at somebody else. The kids weren't angry at anyone. You were angry. And I put myself in front of all that, and all of a sudden I'm the one who's all that anger and all that wanting to have the freedom to just rip me apart. That was scary. And I'm a Vietnam veteran, and I know the mentality of there's enough of this, we can do this. okay, besides the Vietnam veteran lie, if you saw the video of him walking up to a group of children and then claiming that his children were angry and they wanted to rip him apart, you can watch the video on YouTube. It's just absolutely insane. Another portion of the interview transcript also quoted Phillips as using the term Vietnam veteran in reference to himself, since the CNN video only included selected excerpts from the longer interview, not including the part quoted below. We couldn't verify whether he actually said Vietnam veteran in that case or whether it was once again a transcription error. Another portion of the interview also quoted, okay, well, fair enough. When they're looking for trouble, looking for something. Everybody knows the right to life, pro-choice has been like this, and they're hateful to each other. And it's because I'm a veteran, I'm a Vietnam veteran, that these two groups even have the right in this country to have protests, to have conflicting opinions. If they were doing that, they shouldn't have done that, and that was when they come to public. This wasn't a place for that. That was a public forum where we was at. We were still under the protection of our permit for the Indigenous Peoples Rally, except you walked up to them. New York Times stated that their incorrect description had come from information provided by the Indigenous Peoples Movement, and the Washington Post noted leaders of the project said the group had erroneously reported Phillips as a Vietnam veteran, but that Phillips never told them that he served in Vietnam. Okay, that's possible. In reality, he served from 72 to 76 in the Marine Corps. And as stated above, Marines left Vietnam in 71. So being a Marine Vietnam veteran era doesn't make any sense if he was a Marine post the Marines leaving Vietnam. So that statement, when he refers to himself as a Marine, is just nonsense. He was eventually became a refrigerator technician. And so the group says the error was on their part, not on his part. Possibly. Now, here's where it gets a little hairy. In an older, rambling Facebook video that surfaced after the controversy broke, Philip could seemingly be heard to say, either you heard it or you didn't. Was he speaking English? Do you understand English? At around the 9:35 mark, I'm a Vietnam vet, and I served in Marine Corps 72 to 76. I got discharged in 76. I don't talk much about my Vietnam times. I usually say I don't recollect. I don't recall those years. And the video you can watch it on YouTube or anywhere. Okay, so he clearly says, I'm a Vietnam vet. Quote, I'm a Vietnam vet, unquote. Boom. He said it. This whole article is disingenuous. You should have started the article with this and said, yes, Phillips in a video at around the 9:35 mark claimed to be a Vietnam veteran and where he served in the Marine Corps 72 to 76. Now you might say, well, it was an inadvertent slip of the tongue. No, either you're a veteran or you're not. And I should say, not only was he not a combat veteran, and no, I don't mean to speak against people who aren't combat veterans, because there are people who serve, there's people who serve in combat, and then there are people who serve in forward areas that aren't in combat, and then there are people who serve in the theater, but they're not in forward areas, and they're not in combat, but they're all in the area, because it takes a lot of people to equip a soldier. You know, it takes a lot of food and trucks and mechanics and that kind of thing. But they're all there. The thing is, he wasn't even there. Not only was he not a combat, he wasn't in a forward area, he wasn't in theater, he wasn't in Vietnam. He never went to Vietnam. If he would have to go to Vietnam now as a tourist to say he went to Vietnam. And not only was he never in Vietnam, he was never in the Marines at a time when the Marines were in Vietnam, and he never left the States. He was a refrigerator tech, and he did some other stuff, other mechanical stuff, which is all well and good. But he says, I don't talk about my Vietnam times. I usually say I don't recollect, I don't recall those years. Obviously, he's hinting about what a hard time he had as a combat veteran in Vietnam. Obviously. I'm a Vietnam vet. I don't talk about those times. Snopes is absolute garbage. This is a material misrepresentation of the truth. It's an objectively verifiable lie. For Snopes to say otherwise, everything Snopes says at this point is garbage. They don't correct this. But in other similar videos, and the thing is, he's 64. He's not 94. You know what I'm saying? He's not some addled elder. He's only 64. It's not that old. But in other similar videos, Philip describes himself as a Vietnam era vet, or references Marine Corps service without mentioning Vietnam. Okay, so in one video, he clearly, or two possible videos, the one with CNN and the one on Facebook, he clearly said he was a Vietnam vet. In other videos, he said he was a Vietnam era vet. It doesn't make, he could have 100 videos saying he's a Vietnam era vet and one video saying he's a Vietnam vet, but it is a factually true statement to say, yes, he claimed to be a Vietnam vet. For Snopes to say otherwise, it means Snopes is just carrying water for this guy for some reason. And I can't imagine why. In those many hours of interviews and videos, Phillips has made a number of unclear and ambiguous statements. Well, unclear and ambiguous statements about his veteran status, shouldn't that indicate dishonesty about his service that allow for a variety of interpretations or misinterpretations? In the first Facebook video linked above, for example, he stated in reference to a form related to his discharge that he left the service in peacetime, and what my box says is that I was in theater. He didn't say what theater, though obviously it refers to combat theaters. Theater of war is a very common phrase. When people talk about World War II, they talk about what theater they're in. The European theater, the war in the Pacific, the war with the Japanese, or the war with the Italians and the Germans. That's what theater of war means. It is always referred to combat. You know this. Everyone knows this. It's a common phrase. He didn't say what theater, though. Are you implying he went to a movie theater? Come on. Nor did he directly declare that he was in fact in theater during his time in the Marines. That's true. He says the box says I was in theater. Obviously, he's implying that it is true. Why would he reference a statement that was false, that he knew to be false? Why would you reference a statement on your form that you knew to be a falsehood and not correct it? Because you're lying. He cryptically observed something about a box on his discharge form, and it was unclear whether he garbled what he was trying to say, was being deceptive, or was pointing out a mistake. How is that unclear? The Vogue article, Philip referenced Vietnam and his being a recon ranger, but again, the statement was ambiguous. He said he was from Vietnam times and that I'm what they call a recon ranger, but he was again unclear whether he intended his statement to convey that he had actually served as a recon ranger in Vietnam. I'm from Vietnam times and I'm what they call a recon ranger. How is that unclear? He did not serve as a recon ranger in Vietnam, or whether he was using the term recon ranger to describe his post-military activities. Reconnaissance, a ranger is a military title. There's the General Army, there's the Rangers, and then there's the Special Forces. Ranger is a military designation. Reconnaissance is also a military designation. You're saying he used a military term. He's obviously saying, he's referring to his Vietnam times. I'm from Vietnam times, and I'm what they call a recon ranger. Snopes. I have a relative here who said he'd lead the way and scout ahead for us. Phillips continued, his voice breaking. You know, I'm from Vietnam times. I'm what they call a recon ranger. That was my role, so I thank you for taking that point position for me. Okay, all these things are referencing the military active combat. Point position, a person goes on point, they go ahead of a small group to scout out dangers. They go ahead to scout out dangers and traps and to set off traps and to kind of almost draw fire. They're kind of it's a very dangerous position to be on point. I'm from Vietnam times. I'm a recon ranger. Thanks for taking the point position. It's pretty clear. It's pretty clear what he's saying. It's clear to anyone but Snopes. It's obvious he's trying to disassemble and be a little disingenuous. He's trying not to get nailed down on comments, but it's clear what he's saying. According to Nelson, Phillips' comments were taken out of context, and he actually was referring to the work they were doing at the time on the reservation. So he claims he's a recon ranger in Vietnam era times, but it's not in Vietnam era times. 2008 article about 2008 article, Native American veterans. Phillips was cited as maintaining that he had been called a baby killer and spat upon from his service in 1972-1976 when he was not in Vietnam. Experiences commonly reported by Vietnam veterans returned to the U.S. Article now identifies him as a veteran of the Vietnam era. So you're saying that hippies spat on an American Indian? I think not. The article has been adjusted from its original version to show that Nathan Phillips was a Vietnam era veteran and that he was spit on in uniform as opposed to when he was returning from combat. So he was a Vietnam era veteran for 1 year when they left Vietnam in 73, but he was employed from 72 to 76. So for most of his employment, he was not a Vietnam era veteran. Did Phillips explicitly say he suffered such indignities while returning to the U.S. from Vietnam, or did the writer mistakenly assume that was from something less specific that Phillips said to him? Obviously, he's implying he was a veteran of the Vietnam era. They called him a baby killer and spat on him. Did those things happen? No, probably not. Is he implying that he was a Vietnam combat soldier? Of course he is. Of course he is. He says, I don't talk about those times much. Obviously implying that he suffered post-traumatic stress, or it was a dark and difficult time, in the jungles of Vietnam, except he was never there. He joined the Marines and served as an infantryman in the Vietnam War. But the reference was soon excised from the article without a correction note. So Vogue lied? Or did Vogue make that up out of whole cloth? Or did Phillips falsely represent himself? Well, it's Vogue, and Vogue is not very reputable. Again, did Phillips explicitly tell the writer he was an infantryman in the Vietnam War, or was that another misunderstanding of something Phillips or someone else said? Well, here's a thought. Why don't you interview Phillips? Just simply ask him. I'm sure he would correct himself, but the thing is, he seems to be unfamiliar with the truth. It's difficult to determine at this point whether Phillips has deliberately misrepresented the nature of his service. No, it's not. He clearly said he was a Vietnam veteran, and he was a recon ranger. And he also said he was a Vietnam veteran, a Marine Vietnam veteran, when the Marines had left Vietnam in 71. He'd been so vague and ambiguous. Well, he'd been vague and ambiguous in some statements, but in a couple statements, he clearly said he was a Vietnam veteran, as you quoted a few paragraphs ago. Did you forget that? So they're saying he was confused, but he's only 64. Or whether he's trying to be accurate, but maybe it just occasionally slipped up in his many, many hours of conversation. Then why wouldn't... The thing is, what he didn't say is, why not just, when he's being interviewed, why didn't Phillips just come out and say, he says, I'm a Vietnam era veteran, but I was never a combat soldier. I'm a Vietnam era veteran. I'm a veteran of the Vietnam era, but I was never in Vietnam. I served in the United States. Why wouldn't you clarify that in interviews? You're saying he gave many, many hours of conversation, many, many interviews, but not once, if I'm reading this right, not once did Phillips come out and say, I never went to Vietnam. I served in the United States, or I served in Europe. I was a mechanic. I served my country, but I was not a combat soldier. Obviously, you would come out and say that. You wouldn't say I was a Vietnam era veteran. They called me a baby killer. They spat on me. I was a recon ranger. I don't talk about those times much. Obviously, he's implying he served in combat in Vietnam. Nevertheless, at times it certainly sounded as if Phillips was trying to foster the impression that he had both served in the Vietnam War and had been deployed to Vietnam at some point during his service, even if he didn't literally say so, except he did literally say so at least once. We note the Veterans Affairs Office, the purpose of determining eligibility for a pension, consider Vietnam era to be the period 61 to 75 for those who served in Vietnam, and 75 widow, okay, for those who served elsewhere. Military Times noted that Phillips had spent 4 years in the Marine Corps Reserve and left in 76 with the rank of private. Marine said in a statement providing his personal releasable information, but we haven't yet obtained copies of Phillips' official service records to verify exactly where and when he might have served. We note an image purporting to be a copy of his DD-214 discharge of active duty had been circulated. The image has not been verified. Well, why haven't you verified it? Okay. I wonder if there's any... No, I'm sure they don't show comments. Okay. This is Snopes. He clearly says, crystal clear, I'm a Vietnam veteran in this video. Does it play? I don't talk about this times. Dark times, and I don't know wherever the hell he served in the United States. Dark times working on the refrigerator. Dark times with coolant. Pick a key, buddy. Pick a key. Oh, this is fascinating.
Oh, look at that. Sore eye.
That's fascinating. Thank you for telling me.
I don't know if anybody's gonna see this.
36 minutes of this. Okay, I can't watch 36 minutes of this.
Going back. Alright. Here we are with the Indigenous Report. Wednesday night. It's Nathan. This Wednesday evening, we want to be trying to do this.
I think he said it was at the 9-minute mark. So while that is just so interesting, let's get right to the 9-minute mark. I wonder why Snopes included the whole video. I guess just in the interest of being so honest.
The United Nations back in February, March or April. I think it's April. There was the Indigenous Forum of the United Nations, and we had a pipe ceremony there. And it was after the pipe ceremony I started having dreams about being at Standing Rock.
What was in that pipe, buddy?
Walk out.
I want to share it.
And
that's all I'm saying.
All the structures on fire. And
share the pipe.
And I was walking, Well, February 22nd, that day, that was my birthday. I turned...
A day that will live in infamy.
63 that day, February 22nd, last year. And I was thinking... it wasn't exactly how I wanted my birthday to be. Really.
Cocaine and hookers.
I'm a Vietnam vet. I served in the Marine Corps 72 to 76. I got discharged May 5th, 1976. I got honorable discharge, and one of the boxes in there, it shows if it was peacetime or what my box says is that I was in theater. I don't talk much about my Vietnam times. I usually say I don't recollect, I don't recall, those years. But what I seen walking out of Oshedi that day, anyway.
Was repairing refrigerators that traumatic?
How I wanted to spend my birthday. So
Anyway,
February 22nd,
this is cancer.
1964,
This is absolute cancer.
and
This guy is a
I
liar.
was walking out.
Snopes is absolute garbage. Absolute garbage. Subscribe if you're not already subscribed, and leave a like and a comment. And if you have a problem with substance abuse, get a 12-step program to help you. You don't have to be a 64-year-old insane alcoholic.